I came across an interview I did a couple of years ago with two guys, Darren and Graham, from Grimerica, which describes itself as a loose cannon podcast. In that discussion, we were talking about servitors, which is the chaos magic process of creating a spirit to act as your familiar, that is, a serving spirit. And I gave the example of myself because I'm getting old and forgetful. I created a butler spirit I called Jeeves. And so, for example, one of the things that's very irritating is that I leave the house, lock it up, go to the car and find I haven't got my car keys. So I have to go back, unlock, go back and get the keys and come out again. So I would say to Jeeves, remind me to take my keys. And that was helpful. As I was walking past where the keys are kept, I'd remember to pick them up. When I described that, they said, that's a biohack. Apparently this was a sort of, at the time, was a new trendy thing, biohacking. And they said, for example, people who keep forgetting to go running in the morning, they'll put out their shorts and tell their shorts to remind them to go running. Great. And they find it works. Now, it works because you're treating those shorts as more than just dumb objects. You're starting a sort of conversation with them. Now, the question I said, well, that's terrific. It's just what I'm talking about, really. But does it last? I bet that people take up that practice and they do it for a few weeks and then it sort of fizzles out and they don't keep doing it. It sounds too much like a sort of trend. Because what I said is you actually need to do more than just give those orders. Remind me, blah, blah, blah. You see, I found that it worked better when not only did I tell Jeeves to remind me to take the keys, but as I walked past and I found it coming to my head, take the keys, I'd say, thank you, Jeeves. Politeness, respect. So you might say, I see, that's the formula. You tell the spirit what to do and you thank it when it does it. No, we're not really talking about a formula. Would you really treat a friend like that? Give an order, thank him cursedly, when it's done. No, what I said to them is you see, really, you ought to say things like, hey, Shorts, it's good to see you. I'm really looking forward for our run tomorrow. See, sort of build up more of a relationship. Let them come to life, if you like. You see, with Jeeves, I don't often remember to do it, I'm afraid, but sometimes if I'm sitting down at a really nice meal, I'll invite Jeeves to say, hey, come and enjoy this with me. Things like that. Ask him how he's getting on. It's a question of respect. Can you treat things like a real being, not just an object? Now, I dealt with this at length in my book, The Little Book of Demons. And some people in reviewing that book said they found it very interesting and valuable, but they were unhappy that I hadn't actually spelt out exactly what you're supposed to do with a demon. They wanted like a ritual. What they really wanted was a book which might have a title like 7 Steps to Demon Mastery, laid out like a neat formula. And I gave the example in the book of why that is not what I'm talking about. I said, you know how between partners who love each other, sometimes you get a really simmering row when the relationship goes wrong. And very often in that, it isn't a question of just one person being in the wrong and the other being right, although they both think that that's how it is with them. What typically happens is that one of them, say, goes to work and thinks over the last row they had and thinks, well, yeah, I was a bit of a shit. I think tonight I'm going to make a real effort. So, buys flowers, buys a takeaway, a bottle of wine, comes in and apologizes and says, "Look what I've got." And the other person rejects it angrily because they happen to have had a really tough, hard day and they're just not in the mood. And so the whole thing flares up again. So I said, imagine, I think most of us have had that sort of experience. Imagine it, and then imagine one day you come home, tired, exhausted, blah, 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 in a bad mood, and your partner is absolutely sweet. Says just the right things, doesn't overdo it, calms you down, gives you a nice evening, and you think, wow, gosh, this is fantastic. And then later that evening you find a book by the bedside called 7 Secrets for Handling Difficult People. And you open it and you flick through and you realize all the things that your partner did are advice from this book of what you should do with difficult people. I say, well, do you feel good about that? I think many of us would feel a bit insulted. There's something disrespectful. You're being treated as a difficult person and a formula is being applied, which is not the same as being treated with real respect. So why is it actually quite difficult to keep up this respect? To build a relationship with your running shorts or with Jeeves the butler that really develops and preserve, is a what's the word they use? A sustainable relationship. Now, I think the answer is because we are brought up in a scientific worldview where you are the agent and things around you are objects that you can work with. And in the Little Book of Demons, I gave this example, which I've often quoted, of the beginning of this process. I said, a little baby that can't yet speak begins to learn about the world. And the first thing it does is it learns what is really proto-science, cause and effect. You push the spoon to the edge of the table and it falls to the floor. And it happens again and again and again, predictably. The baby is learning something, how objects behave. Now, another object called mother comes and picks up the spoon and puts it back, but not so reliably. Mother sometimes delays, sometimes does it with a smile, sometimes frowns or takes it and washes it before putting it back. There's something that doesn't work with mother the way the spoon works. And then I suggested there's this amazing new idea that maybe inside the mother there's another thing like me. Basically, you're, without using those words, you're sort of exploring the idea that there might be a spirit in mother. And I say this is the beginnings of magical thinking, or an important part of magical thinking, where you can then think that maybe there's a spirit in all the people around me. Maybe there's a spirit in the cat, which could explain some of its behavior. Maybe the weather has got a spirit in it, because sometimes the weather does seem to be in a bad mood, and so on. You begin to treat the world around you with respect, as though it's not an equal to you necessarily, but there is a consciousness there that is worth forming a relationship with. The first leads to being an agent in a dead environment, whereas the magical approach leads to being a participant in a living world. Now, this might seem to some people, with scientific thinkers, to seem like a rather weird idea, but it does come naturally. It is human nature. You've seen people talking to their computers, talking to their cars. Now, the thing is, they're not generally proud of that. If you say, why are you talking to your computer? They would say, oh, sorry, it's just a habit or something like that. On the whole, they won't justify it. But the fact is, it's a very natural thing to do. Now, to a critic, it looks like rather a dumb thing to do. How stupid to be talking to a computer or talking to your car. But have you seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari? Because in that movie, there's this racing driver, it's based on truth, Ken Miles, who was involved with the development of GT40, which was Ford's first racing car to be entered into the 24 Hours of Le Mans race. And he talks to it. He has such a sensitive relationship with that car that he's able to squeeze out that little extra performance in the movie that leads to him winning Le Mans. It's an amazing, it's done very well, acted very well. Now you see, all drivers have got an eye on what gear they're in. They can see the speedometer, the rev counter, etc. They've got all this digital data being given to them about the car and how it's doing. But Ken's mind went right inside that car because he'd helped to build it, he helped to develop it. He was picking up subtle cues from not just the meters, but from the sound of the engine, the sound of the tires, the feel of the wheel in his hands, the sense of what the tires were doing on the road, and all sorts of very subtle clues. And that's what gave him the edge. To see how different that is, I'm going to give a comparison, a contrast between two conversations. One is a program that asks you to log on, or say you type in a query on Google, and back comes a page of answers. How good they are depends how well you type that query. That's like a digital response to a digital input. Contrast that with the day you go into your office and someone who is, there's acquaintance but not a very close friend, comes up to you, taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you're looking good today." 5 words. Now, what can you get from those 5 words as you stand in his presence? First, his tone. Is he being friendly or is he being sarcastic? Or he might be being ironic. You might actually be feeling like shit and looking like shit. And he says, "Hey, you're looking good today," as a sort of put down, Okay, so perhaps you decide, this is a real comment. I don't see any sarcasm in there. But what about that word today? You're looking good today. Is he implying I don't normally look good? Is it an implied insult? And from the tone and the manner and the way he's looking at you, you decide, no, it isn't that. There seems to be some sincerity there. So he's not kidding me. But does he really mean it as a friendly thing? Or is it maybe a prelude that later in the day he's going to ask for a favor? Is he buttering me up? Will he want help with his work or something? And so on, and so on. Those 5 words carry so much meaning, and so much of the brain goes into processing them, that this is not a dumbing down. It's like Ken Miles, you see. His mind went right into the body of that car, hearing so many clues and getting so much more information that made him an actually fantastic racing driver. It's far from a dumbing down process. So, practicing respect like this does make the world come to life And it also works with other human beings. You can treat them like objects. You can learn ways to press their buttons, to manipulate them. Or you can treat them with respect. Now, the thing is, I agree, with some humans that can be hard.